So the issue of climate change has been largely discussed in the scientific community as well as in the media to such an extent that it has become associated to almost all discussions related to sustainable use of energy. The figure on the left here shows the anomalous behavior of global temperature change since the later part of the Industrial Revolution in the 60s, when the significant carbon loading of the planet has occurred. The figure on the right shows the exponential rise of atmospheric CO2 concentration. Here are the charts of CO2 emissions by sector, where we can see that transport emissions make up just over a quarter of UK's total emissions and almost a third of the European emissions. So the contribution of the transport sector in CO2 emissions is quite significant. Now let's have a look at the charts of transport CO2 emissions by mode. Here we see that more than 2/3 of the transport emissions are coming from road transport. This is the mode which needs to be looked after carefully because this is where the potential for emission reductions is the highest. Moreover, poor air quality due to road traffic reduces the life expectancy, and there are up to 50,000 people a year in the UK who die prematurely because of air pollution. We all know that there is a sharp rise of human population in the UK, in Europe, in the world, and we see here that there is also an increase in the number of automobiles on the road. So here we see the share of vehicle by country in the UK and the share of vehicle by type. In 2015, there were about 36 million vehicles on the roads, of which 33.5 million are cars and vans. We can see that for the world as a whole, an increased use of fuels are consumed for transport. For the developed economies of Western Europe, we can see that the transport-related energy consumption are beginning to stabilize. This is very important because it means that the related CO2 emissions are also stabilizing. This stabilization, we can see here for Europe and the UK, can be explained because of the greater efficiency of new vehicles despite of the increase in energy use. The fossil-fueled automobile has served mankind for over 100 years, but its energy audit shown here indicates an efficiency of only 13% to move the vehicle mass. Indeed, there are about 62% lost by heat from the engine and 17% lost during standby. Oil prices are subject to high price volatility. This is also true for all fossil fuels. We can see here the rise of the price of fuel delivered to the motorist. In the UK, the fuel price rose by almost 100% within a decade between 2000 and recent decrease due to oil overproduction in 2014. The electricity price is also rising. However, the price of electricity is much more governable because multiple sources contribute towards its generation, including renewables, which have now a very significant share in the electricity generation mix. For example, within the UK, the peak power capacities from solar, with almost 10 gigawatts installed, plus wind with 14 gigawatts installed, are now more than half of the total demand placed on the grid, which is about 44 gigawatts peak. So we see now here the main drivers towards transport electrification, which are growing pollution, rising oil prices, depleting oil reserves, increasing environment awareness, governmental incentives. They are all pushing the electric vehicle sales. On top of that, using an electric vehicle, we have less fuel consumption, lower running costs, silent operation, and zero tailpipe emissions, which all makes electric vehicles very attractive compared to combustion engines. So we have electric vehicles, which seem an interesting option, but what are the other alternatives to diesel and gasoline vehicles? For example, we have biofuels, which have the advantage of being a renewable source. When burnt, they emit less CO2 than gasoline, and they are adaptable to current conventional engines. However, biofuels imply a monoculture of the land, which could be used instead for the production of food or vegetables. Monoculture means also the use of fertilizers and pesticides, and large quantities of water, which could be an issue in dry countries. And similarly to oil, biofuels are also subject to price volatility. Another alternative is the natural gas, which can be used to produce electricity for electric vehicles or as a fuel in combustion engine vehicles. To produce the same amount of electricity, the combustion of natural gas emits 30% less CO2 than oil and 50% less CO2 than coal. However, we lose half of the efficiency when the natural gas is used as a fuel in a combustion engine vehicle as compared to when it is used for electricity generation in a power plant. Indeed, 30 cubic meters converted to electricity yield 480 miles in an electric vehicle, while about 30 cubic meters in a natural gas vehicle have a range of only about 240 miles. Moreover, this alternative to diesel and gasoline requires the installation of natural gas pumps in filling stations. Hydrogen is the fourth alternative to diesel and gasoline. Hydrogen energy is renewable because it is made of water and it has minimal environmental impacts. There are no tailpipe gas emissions. However, we still need electricity in the first place to separate hydrogen from oxygen. Hydrogen is kind of expensive to produce, to store, and to transport. It has low energy to volume ratio, and so the hydrogen fuel tank takes a lot of space. It is also very flammable and requires specific infrastructure in filling stations. So, if electric vehicles seem probably the best option for a sustainable transport future, what are the main challenges for the complete electrification of the transport sector? Well, first, a significant public investment is necessary for charging infrastructures. Then, the battery cost place the electric vehicles out of the market without government support. And finally, the range anxiety and concerns over battery durability are threatening the consumer acceptance for the moment. We see here that the main issue regarding electric vehicles is the electricity storage in batteries. It is true that batteries are expensive, they are heavy, they have limited capacity levels for the automobile industry, but this is why it is the component which is getting the most attention in research and development investigation in order to find solutions for the batteries to be able to store larger amounts of electricity and become cheaper.